Hey guys, how's it going? Comparing here. So, it's been about a year since I made a Diablo 2 video, and that's because, for whatever reason, I happened to be playing Diablo 2 because of a ladder reset around this time just about every year. Last year I had a rip reel where a lot of my PoE bros ended up playing and dying and getting completely owned, and we had the rip reel. And the year before that, I showed people what the original Whirlwind Barbarian was like. So, I'll link those videos at the end of this video if you guys want to check them out, but I thought I'd keep tradition and play some Diablo 2. There was a ladder reset a couple of days ago. This time around I played, as you can see, a Sorceress. I didn't play a Barbarian because every time I play a Barbarian, and because I was playing with people who are much newer at the game than normal, I thought I'd have to carry pretty hard. And today I want to show you guys exactly the strengths of the Sorceress in Classic, not Expansion, not LOD, Classic Diablo 2 Hardcore. And I want to show you guys this because, one, I know some of the people who played the game way back when will get a lot of nostalgia from it, and those who don't really know, who are maybe interested in a game that's very old, but it's one of the very few games that is good enough in its time to still, in my opinion, be considered a modern game. So it's still that. It's Diablo 2 is still playable. It's still a blast. If you've never played it before, you should check it out. And in my opinion, if you're going to play, don't bother with the expansion. Classic is the way to play. So this is the Ice Sorc. It is the Frozen Orb Sorc. And the strength of the Sorceress in Diablo 2 is that the Sorceress can complete the game with basically complete trash gear. And I want to show you guys the gear. I want to show you guys the progression of the skills and all that, the different options that you have, and generally kill a few monsters to show you guys just how effective it is. So right now my character is level 45. Yeah, it's not in hell yet and all that, but the same concept goes through and through. The Source is a powerful class because, as you can tell from my gear, it's terrible. Yeah, the staff is okay. +1 skills doesn't matter. You just get a couple of resists. Before this, I was using a blue staff with +1 skills. You want to get some flawless rubies for your helmet, and you want to get some life because while you level up, you do put most of your points in vitality, the rest in strength and dex, depending on what gear you choose to use. The vitality that you put in is much less effective than every other class in the game because you get the fewest life points per vitality point. I think you get 2 life for 1 vitality, and I think that is the absolute worst in the game. So life on gear is actually the most valuable on a Sorceress compared to other classes, and as such, a helmet like this that has 3 sockets with even 3 flawless rubies, essentially you want to get them bumped up to perfect eventually, is pretty much one of the best items. The rest is just straight up trash. What you can see is consistent is you want some life on gear, you want some resists. Eventually, you'll be using a shield. I got Wall of the Eyeless, but realistically you'll be using a shield with 3 flawless diamonds because diamonds and shields give you all resist. You don't need quite as many resist in Classic as you in LOD. I believe the hell penalty is -50, which is easy to overcome by using a 3 diamond. I'd like to go with Tower Shield, but whatever kind of 3-socketed shield you find, as well as using a wand like this. Wands are great because they can get very high resist bonuses. With the later items, this is only required level 18. You could get a wand that has over 40 to each of 3 resists. And if you get a really good one, you'd probably skip the poison to get fire instead because poison resist and to some degree cold resist is fairly terrible in Diablo 2, specifically in Classic. And maybe you'd want to get some cast speed. So if you combine those 2 wands, maybe make it a little bit better, you'd have that little dream. But still, an item like this is fine. Using flawless diamonds in 3 sock shield is fine. Using 3 flawless rubies in a helmet is fine. It's fine because the class is powerful. It just has some difficulty leveling, and I want to show you guys how I leveled and things to consider in that. So you guys have seen the stats. This is consistent with every build. You get as much vitality as you can. Yes, it'll be a pain because you have to chug mana potions like no tomorrow. I mean, look at that inventory. All you basically do is chug mana potions with this type of character, but it's fine. It's how you play it. It makes it a little bit easier if you play in a group, but still, you'll be alright. As far as the skill goes, I recommend leveling up fire. I recommend staying fire until, I did it until about the high 30s, but I think straight up when you're level 30 you can go cold because Frozen Orb, which is the build that I am, is a very, very powerful skill at that point in the game. But to level up, it's going to be a bit rough with Firebolt. Firebolt's a pretty crappy attack. It's a good idea to get a bow that has sockets and just put random gems in it, just because it'll do pretty much the same damage as Firebolt, and, well, you don't have to use mana to cast it. But if you want to just skill up Firebolt and just use that, it's going to suck, but you can do that. When you get to level 12, which will eventually happen, Fireball starts being very good again, because Fireball gets synergy from Firebolt, and what you have to consider is that it's going to cost a lot of mana. I actually skipped putting a few points in Fireball once I had several levels in it, and eventually I got Meteor. And I didn't use Meteor too much. Meteor seems about as strong as Fireball. But what made Fireball very good is because of the synergy from Meteor and the fact that you can also use Meteor. So instead of putting points in Fireball to up the damage, which also ups the mana cost, you can put points in Meteor, which ups the damage not by as much, but does not up the mana cost. At level 30, you get Fire Mastery, which is a big deal, but the problem is that a lot of monsters are fire resistant, especially in the later acts. So when you get to normal Act 4, even when you get to like Nightmare Act 2, there's even fire immune monsters, so it kind of sucks, and that's really when you want to start considering going cold. So among these skills, among the chain of fire skills that you want to put 1 point in Warmth, maybe even before that first point in Firebolt, because mana regen just a little bit has a very high point efficiency. It's a pretty good idea to get Frozen Armor, because when you get hit, you want to freeze the monster so it doesn't attack you a second time. And Static Field is literally the most overpowered single skill in the entire game, at the very least in Classic. And honestly, Teleport is kind of optional. It's very nice to have, but 23 mana when you have garbage gear in the low teens when you normally get Teleport, it's not very usable because of its mana cost. However, Static Field in Classic Diablo, again, this is a difference from LOD, and you know, as the last video where I showed you guys how powerful Whirlwind is in Classic and how kind of lackluster is in LOD, Static Field is exactly the same. Static Field does not have the limitation. In LOD, you can only get a monster to like half-life or something like that, and you can't get them further than that. Static Field in Classic, when you cast Static Field, it removes 25% of the existing HP of the monster, and you could repeatedly cast it. And this works in Classic all the way until 1 hit point. So when it comes to spamming Static Field on bosses, it is ridiculous. Yes, some bosses have higher lightning resistances, which does impact this ability, but still it is absolutely crazy. So you want to have that even if you're fire, specifically for bosses and tough monsters. When you decide to go cold, you'd want to go a similar build to what I have, and essentially you're pumping up Frozen Orb. Frozen Orb does not do that much damage on the tooltip itself, but there are a lot of little ice missiles, and if you've never seen the effect, you'll see it shortly to see what I mean. But the Cold Mastery makes it very good, because a lot of the damage that you lose in Diablo 2 is from monsters having resistances to your damage types. Now, the Cold Mastery does not take away from monsters' immunities. If they're immune to cold, they're immune to cold. You cannot lower that. But if they have like very high cold resist, reducing that resistance past 0 is going to be a ridiculous damage boost. Much more so than, let's say if they have 75 cold resist, if you double your damage, essentially you'd have facing a target with 50% cold resist, because that would essentially double your damage. So because a lot of stuff has just some kind of resistance in the game, the Cold Mastery is the most powerful mastery. So the lightning and the fire both up damage, but the cold reduces their resistances, which is the most punishing one. So you don't need to do that much damage. Frozen Orb only gets damage from Ice Bolt, and the damage is not very much. 2%, it says, damage per level. It's very, very low. That's why you can actually opt to only get like 5 or 6 points in Ice Bolt. But as you'll find out, because it only has 1 synergy, you can eventually max Frozen Orb, you can max Ice Bolt, you can max Cold Mastery, and then you can even max Static Field if you want. And Static Field, leveling this skill just makes it a higher radius, but that's basically what you do. With Frozen Orb, you want to do Frozen Orb, Static Field, Static Field, Static Field, Frozen Orb. And you'd want to do this because the skill does damage gradually, so you have efficiency of the Static Field potentially hitting the target first, lowering its HP from its maximum, then doing damage with the Ice Bolt's Frozen Orb. And also because when you have a lot of players in the game, your damage is much less significant than the party. So using something like Static Field, which scales with the monsters scaling up when you have an 8-player game, for instance, it does significantly more damage than any other spell could otherwise possibly do. As far as raw damage, Frozen Orb and Static Field combo is a very good one. If you like to stay cold, a lot of people use Blizzard. Blizzard does much more raw damage, but because Blizzard, for it to do that much more raw damage, you can see it has 3 synergies. So you essentially have to max Blizzard, the 3 synergies, and the Cold Mastery for it to reach its peak. And to do that, you can't really put as many points in other things like Static Field, and for instance, some people like to use Energy Shield in Hardcore because it does allow, kind of like that defensive purpose. So enough about the builds. It's pretty simple. With the gear, you basically use whatever. You gotta get some HP because that's very critical. But when it comes to using the character, you get Frozen Orb, you bind that to left click, you get Static Field, you get Teleport, and that's really all you need. Right now my Static Field is level 1 because when you hit Nightmare, the damage that you do with Frozen Orb, as you can see here, is so huge that you don't actually need that complementary life reduction from Static Field. Now, this will not be true against bosses, but when it comes to bosses, what you can often do is stack the resistance of the boss. So for instance, against Diablo, you want to have high lightning resist, high fire resist, and if you have that, you should be pretty safe standing very close to him and just spamming Static Field. You don't have to spam it very many times because most bosses don't actually have that high resistance to lightning, except perhaps Mephisto, but even him, cast it a few times, knock off the boss's health by like 80%, and then, your party can pretty much clean it up from that point. So you can see, I'm in Nightmare right now. This zone is probably a little bit higher than my level, and I'm doing just fine. You cast Frozen Orb, it has a little bit of a cooldown. This is introduced sometime later after the game was released, because Frozen was originally really broken. But now, it's just pretty good. So I leveled up, I'm now 46. What do? I put 5 points into Vitality, I go to my skills. If I had 2 skill points, I'd put 1 in Frozen Orb, 1 in Cold Mastery, but I only have 1 skill point. Do I have a mana problem? While it may seem so, I chugged so many mana potions throughout playing this character that I'd actually argue that I don't. And the mana actually does not increase from leveling up this level. Next level it will, but I'll probably still put that point in there. If mana was a problem, you kind of want to find other ways to increase your damage without leveling the original skill. That's how Diablo works. That's how Sorceress works. Game is pretty awesome. I urge you guys to try it. It's fun to play with friends. It's fun to play when there's a ladder reset. And, well, while I may not play for much more than a couple more days, I am having a good time. I hope you guys enjoy the content. Hope you guys like the interesting, nostalgic feel of the game. And, well, it's interesting to note, I played Diablo 2 on and off for a decade. It's a game I've grown up with. It's a game I love. And honestly, I still rank today's games against it. And most don't keep up.